Okay, we're going to continue on our agenda here. We're going to start out with the Kansas School of the Blind and Deaf, so those folks can get out of here if they're ready to. So, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the chair for allowing me to report out on WebEx on Tuesday. I appreciate that accommodation, and as was noted in the report out, I think I covered everything for those two schools, so with that, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Committee questions? Any adjustments or changes? Seeing none? Was that both the School of the Blind and the Deaf?
Yes, sir, I would move that we approve the budgets for FY25 and 26 for the School of the Blind and the School of the Deaf.
Okay, well, we don't need a vote on them, but, well, that was a report out, so let's go ahead. We have a motion, second by Senator Owens. Any questions? All in favor? Yes. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to the Kansas State Department of Education. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, thank you for letting me report out via WebEx. During that process, we have normally done FY25 and 26. I failed on this report to mention fiscal year 2027 is also listed, but the amounts there are simply reflective of maintenance of effort. The other numbers have not been populated yet, but I do need to state that that is part of this. And the other note I need to make is it came to my attention that there was an item left off of the itemized list for E-rate funding. It was included in the amount, but it was not itemized, so I need to draw the committee's attention to that. And those were the two things on that report out I needed to add, Mr. Chair. And with that, I am happy to stand for questions.
You want to make a motion?
Yes, I move that when we report out the budget for FY25 and 26 and 27 as presented favorably.
Okay, and we have a second by Senator Owens. Questions? Senator Petty? Oh, excuse me. Go ahead, Senator Petty. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I will address the committees to the fact that there was a minority report that was attached with from the dealing with the education budget, and I'm just going to share some points from that. We do not support or agree with the Senate Education Committee's recommendations for the Kansas State Department of Education for FY25 through 27. The recommendations proposed by the committee were made hastily and inadequately fund our schools. On the chair's motion to fully fund Gannon with CPI-U adjustments, no more, no less, to fully fund Gannon and meet our court-imposed obligations, the comprehensive approach and funding of the crafted remedy must also occur. The district court panel's memorandum opinion and order in Gannon in December of 2014 stated that while we found the base state aid per pupil figure set by the school finance was the drive of educational funding to its weighted resulting total, other funding sources provided independently by the legislature were also important. Programs such as teacher monitoring, mentoring, parents as teachers, and the professional development of educators all dovetailed into these endeavors, which imported quality and breadth of effort and involvement into a successful K-12 system. And they were not, those are separate fundings, not part of the base state aid per pupil. So when those were eliminated, cut, or otherwise put in competition for dollars intended for elsewhere, as has been done, the K-12 school system's forward progress is stalled and remains inadequate to the task and diminishes the required learning experience. The chair referred to the motions as a starting point, but time was not afforded to the committee to go through the motions other members wanted to make. Due to this, a minority report is being filed for the Senate Education for consideration by the Senate Ways and Means Committee. It appears that a total amount of $10.9 million has been removed from the substitute for HB 2007 KSDE budget in 2025 and $16.4 million for 2026 as presented in the chair's recommendations. The main concern is the removal of funding from the current 2025 budget, as these are items already paid out by the Kansas State Department of Education or are under existing contracts. One main purpose of Gannon was the use of the 3-year rolling average of the CPI-U Midwest to adjust for inflation each year thereafter. The 3-year rolling average smooths out the heights for the legislature and the lows for the school district. This inflation adjustment was the heart of the Gannon adequacy remedy found to be constitutional by the court. While inflation funds are routinely referred to as new money, the more accurate reference is updating our maintenance monies. Schools are not receiving a pot of gold from which to fund new initiatives, but an inflation adjustment to ensure their budgets retain same purchasing power from year to year. The CPI-U adjustments is a direct reflection of increased costs related to inflation. Rising costs for fixed services such as food, fuel, insurance, utilities, and for competitive wages affect school districts the same way they do for families. The CPI-U adjustment simply allows our public schools to keep up with inflationary costs and to ensure our students' opportunities for success are no longer diminished by this oversight. Montoy settlement was reached at a time when special education excess costs were fully funded at 92% in accordance with the state statute. The impact of continually underfunding for special education cannot be overlooked. These services are not discretionary, they are mandatory and are based on both federal and state requirements. The special education funding formula requires every school district to provide 8% of the excess costs as local effort, and most school districts already transfer much more than that from their local option budgets to make up for state and federal shortfalls. Adding a statutory requirement to transfer dollars generated by the local option budget calculation does nothing to address the effects of the state's funding shortfall of 92% requirement. The local fund transfers necessary to comply with IDEA and to deliver the services required by law for students with IEPs serves to cannibalize the general operating funds of our districts and undermines the value of the Gannon remedy, including the annual CPI adjustments. The minority report for Senate Education concurs with the House recommendations and substitute for House Bill 2007 with the following adjustments. Special education, add $32.5 million SGF for special education state funding for 2026 and include that same amount for 2027 as maintenance of effort and distribute in accordance with the KSA 72-3422 for 2027. This language has routinely been part of the budget bill and gives direction to the statute that governs special education funding distribution. The reappropriation language is important to ensure the state meets its maintenance of fiscal support. Also, Spark will delete the, and this needs to be as part of the recommendations, delete the proviso language relating to Spark will from under the agency's operating expenditure account and to instead include language that will require and authorize such expenditures to be made from any monies appropriated to the agency from the state general fund or any special revenue. This would do the same thing as the motion that was approved. No new appropriation, but just more flexibility in the funding use. Expenditures shall be made by the above agency from such monies in the amount of not less than $1.258 million to provide for student success through the Sparks Will program. Capital improvement state aid transfer. We move to remove striking line 16 on page 180 of sub for House Bill 2007, and this would transfer $328 from the inactive fund to the state general fund. Cited in the Gannon trial court of 2014. Programs such as teacher mentoring, parents as teachers, and the professional development of education all dovetail into these endeavors, which import quality and breadth of effort and involvement into a successful K-12 system. So when eliminated, cut, or otherwise put in competition for dollars intended for elsewhere, as has been done, the K-12 school system for progress is stalled and remains inadequate to the task and diminishes the required learning experience. On page 44, the same principle of robbing, this was in the Gannon report, was said, the same principle of robbing Peter to pay Paul applies to any other necessary but independently paid program or expense that is underfunded and not accommodated elsewhere. These are using the Rose factors if the LOB was considered as well a financial resource to some greater or lesser extent. The removal of any one of these financial pillars, whether separately funded or not, this total funding was, is, and would be a negative and demonstratively in the recent past tuned and still turns the K-12 system on itself, harming its students. So if you look at the attached budget sheet, those items, at risk, bilingual weighting. I'm sorry, I do have a financial sheet here. For 20, in set bill, substitute for House Bill 2007 in 25, the items that were lapsed that should be included are 1.3 million SGF from mentor teacher account, 170,000 SGF for professional development state aid account, 1.482338 SGF for career and technical education, transportation, state aid, and 5 million for school safety and security grants. These were in the 2025 budget. Those funds have already been expended for those programs and should be included in the 2025 budget. And they are maintenance of effort, not enhanced funds. For 2026, the items are 10 million SGF for special education services. That's in page 182, line 28. 1.3 million for SGF for mentor teacher program. That's on page 182, line 25. 1,770,000 SGF for professional development state aid accounts, and $1,482,338 for career and technical education, transportation, state aid. Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions.
Questions? Senator Owens.
So I just want to understand, was there a motion in there? And if so, do we have that in writing so we can see the specific amounts that you were requesting be put back?
Senator Petty.
So those items I just mentioned, I will make as a motion. Due to the fact that we didn't have this completed, it was hard to put it into writing. I have worked with Jesse for that.
So we have a motion. You made a motion, correct?
I will make a motion.
Okay, please do so.
I will make a motion to include the items for FY25 to be funded, and for FY26, that would be the mentor teacher account, professional development. You have in front of you, as part of the materials that you received with the Kansas State Department of Education, you have the budget sheet. It says combined aid to school effects by school years. I'm sorry, that's
Yes, we all have that.
you have that. And if you're looking at your packet, on page 3 for 2025, you can see what was deleted, and the request is those items for school safety and secure grants, which monies that have already been expended, the professional development, again, and the CTP transportation and the mentor teacher program. All are in 2025. Those funds have either been expended or are encumbered already. So I will make it for 2025.
So we have a motion for 2025. Do we have a second? Senator Holscher seconds. Questions and discussion? Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to respond because the recommendation that was made and passed in the Education Committee was very simple. We were sued. There's a ruling. It is Gannon. That's what we are under, or we were. And the recommendation was to continue, as we have been for the past 6, 7 years, to fully fund education per Gannon, including the CPIU. That was the recommendation that passed out of committee. So subsequent to that, I sat down with staff, and that's where this list came from. And it was emailed to the committee after committee when that recommendation was made. So that's where that list came from. And so a little bit of context here. I just want to draw the committee's attention to some things that were said. So I have a memo from the reviser of statutes as it regards to special education. And this is from the Gannon, not Montoy, that the plaintiffs argued that the legislature was not sufficiently funding special education state aid at the 92% rate provided in statute. The Kansas Supreme Court held that the issue of underfunding special education state aid may be relevant to whether the total funding of the school finance system is adequate, but the school finance formula is not rendered structurally inadequate because the 92% entitlement is not reached. In Gannon 6, when reviewing the increases to the school finance system, the court noted that the legislature increased special education funding by $44.4 million. If you recall, last year we increased it by over $70 million. Okay? It also provided for an additional $7.5 million in each year until 2022-2023. The court mentioned the plaintiff's argument that the increase only brought the funding to 83% of statewide excess costs, but the court did not further discuss the matter. In Gannon 7, the court noted that the legislature increased special education funding along with a multitude of other school finance increases. To further add to the discussion, I just think it's important because we hear we're not fully funding special education. And I want the committee, this committee, to understand because we've dealt with this in education. Up until last year, districts can get supplemental state aid for special education. Up until last year when we passed a bill that said they have to transfer that special education LOB into their special education account. Prior to that, they didn't have to. Some districts did, some districts didn't, but there was no requirement that they had to transfer their special education LOB into their special education account. We know that that wasn't happening because when I asked research for the run, and we don't know the impact, but doing the run, we know that if they had been transferring that amount from their local option special ed into their special education funding, for 2024, we would be at 2025, we would be at 91.7% of excess costs. Based on the projections for next year, we would be at 102% of excess costs. The fact that we're only at 73 or 75% shows they haven't been using that. So the narrative that we're having to transfer from general fund to SPED, they've been using SPED LOB for things other than special education. So I just want this committee to understand and have all of the information. Finally, Mr. Chair, I would say as far as it goes, those funds have already been appropriated. We heard in this committee last week about the ending balances and the cash in community college funds, and we found out there were several hundred million. And this committee was kind of, I think, taken aback by that. That pales in comparison to the cash balances in K-12. and they are increasing every year. In 2024-25, the all-fund cash balances for K-12 is $5,958,576,872. That's up from $4.6 billion in 2020. Special education cash balance, $241,549,691,000, not including our co-ops. Not including our co-ops. Those are the cash balances. So to say, and one more point I will make, Mr. Chair, and then I will stop. If you look across other agencies in our budget, you will notice there's some K-12 spending, some K-12 allocation in other budgets across our government. I asked for how much K-12 funding we have in other agency budgets. And I'm just going to give you the SGF number. In 2025, in other agency budgets, we have $98,727,894 of SGF for estimated state K-12 expenditures, excluding KSDE's budget. I just want to give the committee the full context because we constantly hear, you know, it's a shame that students don't have paid lobbyists up here because all we hear is one side of it, and I just want this committee to have the full picture. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Owens. I thought you had your hand up, did you not?
I'm lost,
Oh.
but that's okay. We'll get back to it. As it relates to the actual motion that we are on, that is just the top 4 items, am I correct? For 2025.
Senator Petty.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I believe I said the top 5 items.
Top 5 items. Okay, this is why I'm clarifying.
Excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong page now. Let me go back. I was looking at 26. You are correct, top 4 items.
This motion is 2025, the top 4 items. Got it. Thank you.
That is correct.
Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's important we realize that, you know, we have a few different legs to the step stool here. Gannon is a part of it. But, you know, it's important to keep in mind that when Gannon was filed, SPED was being funded at 92%. So the ruling wasn't necessarily in regard to all of our funding. It was just in regard to the general ed portion. Because again, at the time Gannon was filed, special ed was at 92% of funding. So that meant it wasn't part of the trial court proceedings. And then the other thing we need to look at too, in regard to those cash balances, I mean, of course, that is a prudent thing to do, to have your cash balances there that are earmarked for certain projects. Doesn't mean it's just sitting there for fun. They're earmarked for certain things that are coming up. And so again, when you only look at Gannon by itself and not special ed and these other parts that are part of the system of funding for our schools, by removing these monies from 2025, it impacts the overall picture. So I would encourage the body to vote in support.
Other questions? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I meant, not Madam. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there were some statements made here about LOB at the not being used. I do believe that as I read my points a moment ago, that I mentioned that 8% is what school districts are obligated, 8% of their local option budget to, and that's being more than, most districts are spending more than 8% of not just not their local option budget, but from their state general fund to take care of their special ed options. As was just mentioned, yes, at the time that it was filed, we had been at 92%. As you may recall, that was only for a year. What's happening here is any of you could throw out a lot of different numbers, but it seems to be baiting and switching, talking about unencumbered monies within 306 school districts. So that would include money that would be necessary to have on hand to pay staff, as well as you're, I'm sure, all aware that our school districts have multiple budgets that some are accruing funds to be able to make additions or improvements, maybe needing a new heating system, or they're looking towards some additions. So those would be what you heard as those ending balances that they have. Those kinds of funds would be in there, but those are operating costs. To say that there is 98 million in other budgets, this might be something to have an interim to look at what monies are going to schools, but schools often provide a lot of different things and not just the academics within the classroom. So that's another piece to, as we hear different amounts of money being thrown out. The motion that I've put on the table deals with funds that are in the 2025 budget that have already are encumbered and have been addressed as maintenance of effort from the courts. So it's not just the money that goes in the base state aid per pupil, but also those efforts that go towards professional development and teacher mentoring and parents as teachers, and transportation. So those are all continued efforts that we need to be putting into our schools, and those have been stripped with this motion with the report that was made from the committee. The last thing I would say is that there was a minority report filed because there was not a time provided within the committee meeting to discuss and to follow through on the motions that were made. And one motion was made on the first day and then changed, and then what it referred to was changed on the second day without any input from the committee. So I will move what I have on the table.
Are there any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion fails.
Mr. Chairman, I have a second motion.
Senator Petty.
This deals with the funding for FY26. These are items in the 2025 sub for HB 207, but were removed by the Senate Committee on Education. I do have this in writing, so I will move my motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Senator Holscher seconds.
That would add back in $10 million for special education services aids, that's SGF, 1.3 million for SGF for mentor teacher program account, 1.77 million for professional development state aid account, and 1,482,338 SGF for career and technical education transportation state aid.
Questions on the motion? Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had a chance to hear tremendously especially from my local school districts back home, and special education funding really is a significant challenge. As a matter of fact, USD 373 spent just over $2.4 million in excess costs moving from other areas to fund sped last year. And so I would like to make a substitute motion that we adopt only item 1 from this list of 4.
We have a substitute motion. Do we have a second? Senator Petty seconds. Questions on the substitute motion? Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if the carrier could expound upon what happens in terms of those budgets when special education isn't fully funded. How, what has to happen as far as making up that money, because we are federally mandated to educate via SPED. So if you could expound upon that, please.
Well, certainly, I would also say we're supposed to be federally mandated to receive federal funds for special education as well that we're not receiving. And so it puts us in a bit of a bind, right? We recognize, at least I have certainly seen firsthand, the significant number of increased special education requirements in some of my local school districts. And I can honestly say that I understand a little bit better the position that puts them in, especially a school district where they're already seeing some significant declining enrollment and projected to continue to. And so that's why it's at least important for me to return that maintenance of effort back into the special education equation.
Other discussion? Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that. I just want to, let me put some dollar numbers to it. So if special education state ed had been included in the required amount to be transferred to LOB special education, there would have been $819.5 million more dollars. And that's what districts received, but didn't put all of that into special ed funding. So I know we continue to hear, well, we had to transfer out a general fund for special education. They're getting special ed LOB that they're not having to put until last year when we put it into law. Now that has to go to special education. So I just want to remind the committee, $819.5 million, which would be 102.8% of excess costs. So just for consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Petty.
Just remind the body that local option budget is just that, local option budget. So what is generated in your districts through the local option budget could be very different from what is generated in my districts. So this accumulative figure means I'm not sure how it plays into this conversation at all. And the fact is that actually the statute says 8% of the local option budget can go for special ed, 8% of whatever the local option budget is in your particular district. Whereas in districts in my area, as was mentioned earlier by the senator from his district, mine have, and that's more than one, this is 3 different school districts, but it's 47 million that they are putting in from their general fund to backfill special ed. So that's more than 8% of their local option budget. This 10 million is part of the motion is well below what we did last year as a legislature. And there has been conversation about having a position. We currently, as a Senate, unless I'm incorrect, would have no position when it comes to funding for special ed services without putting this 10 million back in. So I would encourage the body to vote for this. Your school districts and the children within your school district deserve to have, and it is mandated. It is not optional whether we provide special ed services. It is mandated through state and federal law that it be provided.
Any other questions or discussion? Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just add that, all local money well, local money is local money. It's not all state money. So, I mean, there's some differentiation there that we have to keep in mind. And also know districts were required to transfer only their LOB attributed to SPED aid, not their whole LOB. So that's another distinction that's very important here. You know, when it gets to the heart of it, not funding special ed hurts our most vulnerable students. It hurts all of our students overall. So I appreciate the motion brought forward by the senator, and I will be supporting, and I urge the body to.
Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, there was a little distraction over here earlier when Senator Erickson was given the numbers for those two accounts. If it's okay with you, could she repeat those balances when she talked about the reserves and how that would affect or not affect this request?
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are you talking about the cash balances or what excess costs would be if LOB was counted?
Senator Cluse.
Yes, particularly the number for the reserves.
Okay.
Senator Erickson.
Yes, and I asked our research and revisers for the cash balances, and they gave me 5 years' worth of data. So these are the cash balances for all funds for school year 2024 to 2025. It's, you want the exact number or rounded? It's 5.9 billion. For special education only, it's 241 million. And just so you know, just for this year alone, the change from the previous year in the all funds balance, 638 million more went into cash reserves than the previous year. So yes, I understand they have to have some reserves, but the fact that those balances have grown year over year over year over year should tell you something. So thank you, Mr. Chair. And I hope that answers your question, Senator Cluse.
Senator Cluse.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, any other questions? Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to give a little perspective there in terms of cash balances. I have 3 major school districts in Senate District 8, Blue Valley, Olathe, and Shawnee Mission. So again, I just want to give you a little bit of perspective. Blue Valley has 20 million in contingency reserves. That's 1 month of payroll. So you have to have these reserves available. And again, I'd share that with you because I want you to have a little bit of perspective at the scope and the size of the district that we're talking about in perspective to some of these other numbers. So when you look at those cash balances, I mean, I'm assuming we are talking for the state, but I want you to, like I said, take a look at and consider the fact that we have some variances in the sizes of our school districts. And again, 20 million contingency reserves is just 1 month of payroll for one district in our state. So again, I do ask the committee to support this motion because this loss of funds, it's a large impact on our schools in terms of how things then have to be shuffled around from the general funds to cover special ed. And again, we should do it. It's the right thing to do.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm just going to follow up with what was sent by Senator Holscher. We have numbers that are being thrown out here without any in-depth looking at that. And, you know, talking about the local option budget, it's that is exactly what it is. The local option budget is there to help the districts make a decision of how much they have in their local option budget, how much, and that's taxing authority that they have at the local level. It is not state effort, it is local effort. When you do this and throw out a number, that's a point in time. And what we have heard, whether it's in this committee or others, is that on Monday, you could have, let's talk about your own budget, you could have $100, but by Friday, you could have 5 because you've had to pay 4 bills along the way. That's true for you, and it's true for school districts as well. And it's true with special ed. Often the conversation comes up about, well, why is this amount of money in the special ed fund and it hasn't been expended, when in fact the teachers have not been paid yet, and that's in a timely manner. Or the teachers have not been hired because they don't know the number of students they're going to have until a point in time. So these numbers are fluid. And just as has been said during one school district talking about Blue Valley, we could be talking about any one of your school districts be the same way. They have staff that have to be paid, so that you have to have a balance that's in place. This 10 million is not putting us at 92%. I think, I'm not even sure will be dropping below 60% of 70% of effort when it comes to special ed. So the issue for the school districts and what they have to then take from their operating expenses continues to grow. So do not be deceived by the fact that this is more money than they deserve.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quickly, yes, the local option budget is local authority that the legislature gave them. We gave them that authority for that local option budget. So also, numbers are fluid, but when you look, and they fluctuate from month to month, but when you look year over year, just like in our own personal accounts, and those balances are growing year over year, that should tell us something. And as far as throwing numbers around, I think that could be true of both people here. I mean, we're both throwing numbers around. I'm giving you numbers from our revisers, from our research. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the late teens, there was a report came out, the A&M report, which looked at efficiencies and how we could save money here in the state. One of the items they identified at that time was these ending balances for the school districts. And if my memory serves me correct, I may be off here a few $1 million, but it was only 1.7 billion in 2017-18. I'm pretty sure that was the number. And it's grown now to 5.9 billion. So we're obviously not using those accounts, and it's just that money is continuing to grow in that excess funds account.
Other questions? Senator Holscher.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what year you said, but I think it was one of the years when we were substantially underfunded. So of course, I would hope we have more reserves now. You know, we had a time period there of substantial underfunding of our schools that we have been trying to build back from. So yeah, I would hope we have more reserves in that regard, because I know when my children were in school, you know, we were in that time period of huge cuts. We were losing teachers left and right. We didn't have supplies. So again, I would hope things do look quite a bit different compared to that time period. And I do want to add on too, you know, again, without this proposed 10 million, we're at 72% of spec ed funding. I mean, that is not the direction we need to be moving in terms of fulfilling our obligation to our children, to our most vulnerable population. So again, I encourage the committee to support this.
Senator Petty. No? Anyone else? Seeing no one else? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? No. Motion fails.
Division.
Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, raise your hand. Motion failed. Senator Erickson, do you have anything else? Okay. Anyone else have anything else? Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Excuse me, we're back on the petty motion. That was a substitute motion, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as a reminder, the motion that we had on the, I'm trying to get back to the right page, that we had before us had to do with the items that included there's my paper right there. So we had, number one was the 10 million, which was in the substitute motion, 1.3 for the mentor teacher program. Again, this is maintenance of effort. This has been directed by the courts over and above what we have within the per pupil expenditure. 1.77 for professional development state aid and 1.482338 for career and technical education transportation state aid. I will remind you, Senate Bill 155, that's part of that bill, and that the transportation is provided for students to be able to get to those career and technical programs. And this is, again, continued maintenance of effort to put that in place. We have expressed great interest here of, of apprenticeships and alternative paths for our students, whether it be community college or higher ed, or a certificate within a program that can put them into the workforce and be productive Kansans. So this is supporting that so that they can get those career and technical education. With that, I will move my motion.
I think. You have another motion? Yeah, it's already moved and seconded, so. Any questions on the second part of that motion? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion fails. Anything else on? Okay, seeing nothing, we'll move on. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, Senator Cluse, excuse me. I forgot you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got an amendment.
Are they going to hand it out? Yeah. Okay, we'll give them a minute here and have everybody look at it. And
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, this amendment just simply adds back.
just hang on one second. We'll let everybody get it, and they can look at it, and then. This has nothing to do with the education, is that right? Is this is a DCF amendment, is that?
No, it's education.
Okay, okay. Senator Cluse, if you'd like to explain. Senator Cluse, would you like to explain your bill or your motion, your amendment, please?
Yes. It just simply adds back the 50,000 for the Spark Wheel from the KSDE to DCF, and with that, I'll move my amendment.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Senator Clays. Discussion? Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and to give just a little bit of context, when we were looking at the education budget, we originally thought this was under the Children's Initiative Fund. We tried to trace the origins of it. This is basically a flow-through. Sparkville gets other money through DCF, through TANF funds, and it just seems that this would just be an easy match just to move this over to DCF. So that's a little bit of context.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Anything else on the education? Oh, Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a voice in my ear, heard a yes over here, so kind of threw me off track. Anyhow, I do have another amendment here, and this particular one, this proviso is not going to add any money, rather, it's going to provide Kansas Department of Education the authority to expand the current efforts to include middle school teachers. And if I can find that. So this will be the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay, I have a motion, second by Senator Clays. Discussion, Senator Peck. Oh, questions?
Seconded.
Senator Hosher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear part of your explanation. Could you please just kind of do that again?
Senator Cluse.
Yes, it's, this motion is just basically going to encourage us to authorize the Kansas Department of Education to expand its current contracted efforts to train elementary school teachers to include middle school teachers in an effort to help.
Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Anything else? Senator Peterson.
CPR training for non-accredited private schools and $125,000 for their purchase of automatic AEDs.
Okay, we have a motion. Is that your motion? Your motion? Do we have a second? Senator Fagg seconds. Discussion on the amendment from Senator Peterson. Senator Petty.
Senator Peterson, could you move your mic so that it's facing you?
Sorry.
Thanks.
Apologize.
That helps us to hear a little bit better. Appreciate it. So in your amendment that we have before us, you are putting a 1.5 into schools safe and secure grants with these stipulations specifically for, it appears, now does this mandate that these schools have to, or provides grants to schools so that they can have the, they can have the resuscitators and they can get that equipment for their buildings? Would that be correct?
It's for the grant.
Senator Peterson.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, it's for the grants. So they can get the equipment and do the training.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Anyone else? Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have a amendment, and if we could get that passed out.
Would you like to explain your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this program basically helps get fiber out to schools, communities, libraries. It's matched here with the federal, so it's a 90-10, and it's kind of a build out on this. I know one of our particular school districts are tapping into this. The key is they only have till March 27th for the ask here. And the only way they get it is by having this match from the state funding. So with that, I move my amendment.
A motion seconded by Senator Peterson. Any questions or discussion? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you say 90-10, is it 10 for the state and 90 for the federal government?
Senator Cluse.
Hope so.
Yes.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Any other changes? Seeing none, I think we're going to. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I move that we approve the Kansas State Department of Education budget for fiscal year 25, 26, 27 as amended.
Okay, well, motion second by Senator Clays. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries. Senator Petty would like to be recorded. Before we move on to the next budget, lunch is here, and I'd like to thank Michael O'Donnell for providing lunch today. And if everyone could get it, I think it's, I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's a sandwich of some type. We'll just come back and we'll continue on. So we'll take a 10-minute recess. We'll be back in here at 12 o'clock to start again. Thank you. Anyway, somebody got the rest. We'll call our meeting back to order. We're going to call our meeting back to order. Senator Alley, we were going to do commerce, but I know you're just right in the middle of your sandwich, but do you mind getting started, and then we'll give you a break here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we need a staff overview on this?
Kansas Department of Commerce for 2025. The agency requests a revised estimate of $290 million, including $59 million SGF and 324 FTEs. And this is a all funds increase of $12 million above the 2024. And the LBC concurred with the agency's request, but they deleted 5.9 million EDF to remove the reappropriation for 2025, deleted 3 million EDF for the Sunflower Summer Program, and they deleted the 7.5 FTE positions for 2025. The Budget Committee for the Senate concurs with the House Committee on the whole for the recommendation for 2025. Now, you want me to move on to 2026?
Please do 26. Were there any questions on 25? Go ahead and do 26, if you would, please.
On page 4 of the document for 2026, the agency requests $190 million, including $839 million expenditures of SGF and 326 FTEs for 2026. And this revised estimate is a decrease of $80 million or 29% below the 2025 approved amount. And this decrease of $64 million SGF below the 2025 approved amount. The decrease was offset by agency's 9 EDF enhancement requests for the summer program, for Sunflower Summer Program for $3 million, World Cup Marketing $1 million, Healthcare Upskilling Program for $1 million, Mobile Visitor Center for $500,000, and 2 FTEs, the Kansas Art Commission for $500,000, and Transparency Database for $250,000, the Global Growth Program for $200,000, and Kansas Kids Magazine for $125,000, and a broadband grant analysis for $100,000. And the request also includes increased expenditures in the broadband grant of $17.2 million and a job creation program for $5 million. The special committee on legislative budget concurred with their request with the following adjustments: delete 6.3 million EDF and 3 positions for the agency's enhancement, delete 3.7 of EDF for the various programs for 2026, and delete the 6.5 positions for 2026. And the House Budget Committee concurred with their recommendation with the following adjustment: delete 500,000 SGF for micro internships, delete 200,000 SGF for Sports Hall of Fame, and delete or add 2.5 million for Level Up Kansas. In addition to that, Mr. Chairman, the House Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources, which went through and they had a lot of deletions from EDF funds, and also then they would add back in some deletions, and we're talking about over 30 items on that. I can read those, but we also can read those from the report. So the House Committee on Appropriations then met, and they concurred with the Budget Committee's recommendation with the following adjustments. They deleted 1 million SGF for the Kansas City BioHub for 2026, add 1 million all from ARPA interest for Kansas BioHub. Took it out of FGF and put it back in ARPA funds. And then, Mr. Chairman, we again deleted a lot of items a lot of those are EDF funding, and they deleted those from the budget. That was the committee on, the House Committee on Appropriations. The House Committee of the Whole then added 1 million EDF to the operating grant for 2026. And then the Senate Committee on Ways and Means concurred with the House Committees of the Whole's recommendation with the following adjustments. One, delete $28.2 million EDF and remove appropriations and transfers for 2026. Delete 1.5 million all from ARPA interest for rural remote workplaces, and delete 1 million all from ARPA interest for the Kansas City BioHub. Delete 500,000 all from ARPA for the Kansas Industrial Training and Retraining Program. Delete 73,000 all from ARPA to continue preparations for the semi-constitutional for the fiscal year 2026. And this includes salaries and wages for 1 FTE. The Senate Committee on Commerce agreed with their recommendation with the following adjustments. One, add $15.5 million SGF for maintenance, repair, and overhaul of airplanes at Topeka Regional Airport for fiscal year 2026. Add 28.2 million EDF to restore appropriations and transfers for programming for fiscal year 2026. Add $2 million EDF for the Sunflower Summer Program for 2026. Add 1 million EDF for the Office of Broadband Development for 26. Add 920,000 EDF for Tourism Division. Add 500,000 for the EDF for the Kansas Industrial Training and Retraining Program. Add 455,000 for EDF for the International Division for 2026. Add 250,000 EDF for the operating grants for 26, and delete 300,000 EDF for junior achievement for 2026. And Mr. Chairman, I will stand for questions.
Would you like to make a motion?
I will make a motion that we follow the Senate's Committee on Commerce's recommendations for 2026.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Senator Fagg seconds. Questions, discussion. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple of them. We'll start out with the e-aviation item. It's $4 million in ARPA to attract a company that is engaged in e-aviation testing and manufacturing. The amount is for upgrades to ground-based radar and other items to attract this company to Kansas. And again, that's ARPA interest.
Okay, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, that's a motion.
That's his motion. Okay, do we have a second? Senator Cluse seconds. Discussion. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we are going to piecemeal the ARPA interest rather than have a global discussion, or are we going to do both?
Well, I think we've been adding it all along here, so.
On ARPA interest money?
We've been using some of that, yes.
I knew we had on EDIF, but
Yep, and we've done it several occasions.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Senator Clay, Senator Petty?
Senator, maybe I'm just not finding it, but this doesn't specify where. Is that correct?
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We don't specify where. We're just trying to track them to Kansas. So it would be wherever they decided to locate.
Senator Petty.
And that when you talk about wherever they would decide to locate, are we talking about a business in need of an airport, or that they're doing the airport work? I'm not sure.
Senator Clays.
This would be a aviation and aerospace company that is well-known, that has some locations in Kansas already. that is looking to expand into e-aviation. They would set up a testing facility and range at an airport in Kansas. They require upgrades to technology primarily for this particular move. They would then lease the space. The upgrades would actually take place at the airport, so they're not owned by the company itself. This isn't a grant to the company. It is for the upgrades that are necessary for this type of testing and manufacture to occur in our state.
Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Alley.
Mr. Chair, I noticed reading through this, we have a heliport as part of the scope of project here. Can that heliport, or is that heliport strictly for use by this particular entity, or could that be shared to, if it work out with a government agency such as the Highway Patrol?
Senator Clays.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, all the facility setup here would be available to others, including the radar systems. The hope, in fact, being to attract multiple companies that are in need of this. But the words that are used in there are just to broaden it out. You know, the words like vertiport and others are sort of known and defined, but we just threw in heliport as well to capture the style of design that might be used for such a thing so that it would qualify, and we didn't have some lawyer in commerce saying, oh, we don't like how that looks, et cetera.
Chairman.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not, what my concern was, is just not just for this one, but if it's used on the facilities, everyone can use that.
Senator Clays.
Yes, fully accurate, correct.
Other questions? Senator Fagg.
Mr. Chairman's back on the regular lineup. I'm going to wait.
Okay. Other questions for Senator Clays on this motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion. You want to be recorded? Motion carries. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we had some discussion about EDIF, and you'll recall that at the outset, we discussed EDIF as perhaps something that could be used in the future for some of these projects that we have grown accustomed to via the ARPA interest. So I would make a motion, and we'll just have kind of a draft of proviso so that we can use it later in conference. I'd also ask that we retain the position of clearing EDIF so that in conference we have areas to place all of the items that have been sort of meandering around here, including the ones that are already in there. But the motion would be to add proviso language to review EDIF expenditures in conference and to add in the commerce budget back into EDIF.
Do you have?
The SGF budget.
Right. So that's your motion. Do we have a copy of anything? You don't have that right now, is that right?
Oh, I think it's more just a line to review and to have some amount of proviso language, TBD, that allows us to, because of the way that the House rules exist, we would have to have a proviso in now. We couldn't create one in conference, so we'll make up a proviso that discusses EDIF expenditures and how they are used.
Any other questions? Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to be clear. First of all, it's important to be really clear on the commerce budget is actually back in, being utilized in EDIF currently. I wasn't sure if you were aware of that because we did put an amendment in. And I think Sharday actually has a handout of exactly what we did in commerce budget as it relates to the EDIF. And their operating budget is already in there, as well as a number of other things that are in there. I don't know if that would be of interest to you to see.
Senator Clays.
Right, so I'm making the motion now to place it in and not place in the other EDIF items. So those would stay out. That is the motion I'm making.
Senator Owens.
I'm a bit confused because not place in, a lot of those are already in. So
2007.
I'm going to have Sade go ahead and hand this out. I want to make sure we're on the same page. I want to make sure that I understand what you're trying to do, okay?
Senator Clays.
Yeah. So just clarifying with the revisor. So my motion was on HB 2007, which is the actual budget. The Commerce Committee made their recommendations, which you've heard today. Whether or not those are placed in HB 2007 is up to the committee now today. Those are recommendations. I am altering that recommendation by a motion now on HB 2007, the actual budget bill, that would place the Commerce budget back in as the Commerce Committee did, but not place in the other EDIF items. The House already has EDIF items in there. So we would have a separate position going into conference, which would allow for those things to be reviewed and discussed. If we mirror them, then there's nothing for us to do. So I'm just asking that we have a position on EDIF that allows for it to be discussed in conference.
Senator Owens.
Well, maybe I'm not fully clear on how the House rules are working. I've read their kind of changes in their House rules that basically said no new items could be added, but any item added by one House or the other is conferenceable. And so all of the items that we put back in as our proposal out of our committee, whether they mirror what the House did or didn't, would make those items conferenceable. So I don't understand why we're trying to, in essence, strip out everything out of the recommendation except for an operating grant in the name of commerce, if it's all already conferenceable in commerce. And maybe I'm just straight up missing something here. It's possible.
Senator Clays.
Sure. Standard practice in conference on budgets is not to deviate when the House and the Senate have already agreed. So we typically do not go in and start editing things when both the House and the Senate have agreed. If we agree, we agree. And we don't, as conferees, mess with things that have been agreed upon by both chambers. So this would have us not in agreement on those items.
Mr. Chairman, on a point of order, have we
Senator
had a
Peck.
second on the motion yet?
Well, no, not on the motion. We're on the motion. I don't know.
We don't have a second. I'll second the motion. I just thought that we were discussing a motion we didn't have a second on yet.
Describe it again, so I think it just got far afield.
Senator Clays.
Yeah, so that's where we're at. Where we're at now is just simply, I'm making a motion on the Department of Commerce budget that is different than the recommendation of the Commerce Committee that would allow us to have a different position than the House, which would then make it show up on all the sheets differently, and we would have to have that discussion in conference. And the reason that we should have that discussion in conference is because EDIF was created for a very specific purpose, and it has now changed in its purpose and the way it's being used over time. And it makes more sense, perhaps, should we all discuss between the chambers and agree, to use EDIF for economic development initiatives as opposed to some of the things that have been placed into the Economic Development Initiatives Fund as ongoing appropriations that perhaps should receive a higher level of scrutiny by both the agencies in which they should be conducted and by this body. So perhaps those things should be SGF items, and we should have that discussion about those independently. And this gives us the opportunity to do that in conference with the House.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I understand the motion, and I agree with we're leaving these items in, and then we'll discuss, and you, as conference committee, will discuss EDIF in the future. However, we've discussed a lot of budgets here, and my memory's not real like I wish it was. But did we have EDIF funding anything else in the budgets that we have discussed?
Senator Clays.
I believe my motion, so HB 2007 is the thing that we're working on here. So outside of recommendations, I don't know that anyone has made a motion that does anything to EDIF funds in HB 2007 after I cleared it out. Wildlife and Parks. Ag marketing? Oh, son of a, okay. Well,
Senator Clays.
all right, well, you guys put in one of the worst programs ever. Okay, so agriculture went in, so awful. And wildlife and parks went in, and the state water plan fund, so 7.5 million, roughly 7.6 million, went back in during discussions of agriculture, wildlife and parks, and of course, the state water plan fund. Yeah.
Senator Alley.
Well, my concern was that we're dealing with only these items here that were identified by Commerce as put back in. I don't remember all of the other discussions on EDIF, what was in, what was out, and I think your motion would then eliminate those other items. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would like to eliminate them again, yeah. So those would be back out of EDIF, and we would have a global discussion about what gets funded in EDIF and what needs to be SGF in conference. There's several things that need to be determined where the funds come from in conference, because even though the House and Senate have agreed on a number of items, we did not agree on how they were funded. And this would just be added to that list of how they are funded, though I also disagree with ag marketing in its entirety.
I'll yield to Senator Owens.
Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I have some copies being made because I'm going to have a substitute motion here in just a second. So I would like to ask the maker of the motion, am I understanding correctly that if we have, I don't know, the broadband fund that is currently funded per the Commerce position and it equals the House position, that if, so let's say we change that number by $1, if they were equal now, that in conference, you could not still pull that out of the EDIF fund and fund it another way?
Senator Clays.
Yeah, if you change it by $1, it shows up on the sheets as a conferenceable position because we've disagreed in any way. It could be the funding source, it could be the amount, it could be where the money goes. You could appropriate to a different agency and have them do the same function. But all of those things would make those conferenceable positions. It's not to say that all of us couldn't sit around and agree to move something, but it would be highly unusual for the House and the Senate to agree on the floor to a position and then the conference committee to invent some whole new position for both chambers. That's not something we, at least I've not seen that done. That would be strange.
Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I can totally appreciate that. And I think that those are definitely discussions that need to be had. My heartburn comes from the fact that we completely, as a Senate position, in essence, defunded all of the programs initially. The House Commerce Committee came back with a reduced proposal, by the way. It's $6 million less than where it started, and put that back in. And my concern is if we pull that out now, we're going into conference with a Senate position of 0 on those items, and I don't want to do that. And go ahead.
Senator Clays.
So just having been through the system a few times, like the gaming of the system would be this. If you went $1 less on each one of them, the House would just simply concur with that. And they would accept that position, and then we would have no discussion. And it would just be funded at $1 less. So it makes sense to go in at one that forces that discussion to occur, that forces that negotiation, as opposed to a position that someone could simply just take and and, walk away. Like the dollar thing we did previously, I could imagine that if somebody really liked that thing on the House side, they'd just say, yeah, we'll take $1 less. Here we go. We agree. Concur with your position and we're moving on. So that's the gaming of how this will work if we choose to go that path. If you go to 0, which we did several times yesterday, with, I don't believe, a whole lot of intent to actually leave anything at 0, that then gives us the whole bandwidth of negotiating discussions to have happen.
Senator Owens.
I can appreciate where you're coming from. And having spent 6 years on appropriation in the House, I'm pretty confident I understand generally the process of how conferences work. And I also understand if there are 2 different positions, it can be agreed upon that that amount is lower. It just can be. Even if I had $10 and they had $9, we could both still agree to $5 and come out happy. And so I'm going to make a substitute motion that we adopt the commerce budget, but that in that budget, we change each one of these items that are directly correlated to HB 2007 originally, or the House position, by $1. Just so that they can be in commerce and we can have a different position on every one of these items. And then the Commerce Committee can work their magic and come up with positions that both bodies will agree to.
So that's a motion, a second by Senator Petty. Oh, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
Okay, we have a second, and question, Senator Clays.
So you said the conference committee will go have this discussion, but in round 1, they can simply just accept that position, and then there is no discussion. I just want to make clear that that's what's going to happen, that there will not be a discussion on EDIF in conference if you choose to do it at $1 less. The House, should they decide that they don't want to have this discussion, which it, by all intents and purposes, appears they don't, then they will simply concur with $1 less, and we will not have an opportunity to do anything with it. Once they concur, it's over. That's it. Round 1, done. Concurred. So I would object to this if your intent, and if the committee doesn't want to have this discussion and you just want to fund stuff for eternity through EDIF, I mean, hey, that's one way to do it. But that's never been the intent of EDIF, to just be a place where we throw items and have them stick around for eternity that don't really do anything, as opposed to having them actually fund real job-creating projects, which I believe is the intent. So I would suggest we vote this one down, vote for a position that gives us, that forces that discussion in conference, and have this discussion again about what happens next. Because ARPA isn't around forever. ARPA goes away. All of these things that have been identified as job-creating projects, suddenly we're out there searching for SGF for them while they're being taken up by the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks budget and ag marketing. I appreciate billboards in Argentina advertising our cows, but probably not the best expenditure of money that creates jobs in Kansas when we are looking at the projects that are coming down the line. So,
Senator Owens.
I can appreciate that, but I hope that you can also appreciate that I believe the Commerce Committee did pretty darn good work, that we came out of Commerce Committee with a good position, and that I do not want the Commerce Committee and the Commerce budget to go into Conference Committee with 0 position, which is what we would have, $0 worth of positions on every one of these items. That's my concern.
Other questions for Senator Owens? Seeing none, all in favor? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
no.
Division is requested. All those in favor, raise your hand. 4. Those opposed? 5. Motion fails. Senator Clays.
Yeah, just back on the original motion, same argument applies, just gives us a different position in conference, forces the discussion. We will obviously look at funding all of these items. It's just the discussion of how and where they're funded needs to take place. So I'd appreciate your support of the motion.
Senator Alley, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My original question, and I understand what we're doing here with the conference committee, I understand that. My original question was, in the negotiations with all the committees, other committees outside of Commerce, did any one of those, any item be funded with EDIF? And if they are funded with EDIF, will your motion, which we just made, defund those positions to zero?
Senator Clays.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It would be the Senate position to have them at zero, but they are not zero in the House budget, so it would be a conferenceable position. So the House has full funding of each of those items, and we would have a zero on those items, which would then force us to have a discussion about where those items are at.
Have we, excuse me,
Senator Alley.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Have we approved, in the previous discussion and while we've been here, have we approved any item funded with EDIF that would be altered by your motion?
Senator Clays.
The items that were approved when you went through other budgets, because Commerce budget has EDIF, but other budgets like Ag, KDWP, I don't know where the State Water Plan Fund is, but those items were funded in those budgets using EDIF funds. So you did have motions that changed those. Those items would now be taken back out to zero, but they are not out in the sense that they are still a conferenceable position with the House because the House has those items.
Other questions? Senator Holster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I struggle with this motion because it kind of overlooks the work that a lot of people at this table have done, that the chair over the course of the session. So it just, like I said, a lot of people who have come to the table to put together this budget. A lot of work has already been done, and this motion essentially overlooks that work. So I will not be supporting. Thank you.
Other questions or statements? Okay, seeing none. All. Okay, back on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion fails. Or, excuse me, motion passed.
You want it to fail, but.
It did. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was brought to my attention in the last item as we were going through all of those that the broadband development was not in the House position, so I would add the broadband development EDIF line item so that it is a conferenceable position. It will now show up opposite of all the others. It will be a zero on the House side, and it will be funded on ours. So keeping with the spirit of having all of these things discussed, I would make a motion to add back in the Office of Broadband Development.
I have a motion second by Senator Cluse. Questions or discussion? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clarification on the motion. I heard this would be funded with EDIF.
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, yes, it's my understanding that the item, yeah, it would be, it's not in the House position. They took it out. We would have it in our position so that that item would retain discussion.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a problem with having a position, but I thought we just got rid of all EDIF money. I'm having a little trouble tracking. I just seeking clarification.
Yep.
You need.
Senator Clays.
Okay, yeah. So what we just did was took our side to zero and their side funded. In this particular motion, their side is zero, our side is funded. Just retains this item being discussed in conference.
Senator Peck.
But our side is funded with EDIF money that 5 minutes ago was zeroed out. Or not.
Senator Clays.
Correct. So previously this was funded in EDIF. So this year in 26, it would show up EDIF on our side, zero on theirs.
Other questions? Senator Petty?
And just for clarification on that, is that you said the Office of Broadband, is that the broadband, I'm looking at the screen sheet, is that the Broadband Development Program? And are we talking about the 1,095,416? Is that the amount?
Senator Clays?
1,191,249 in 2026, the Broadband Development Program is the second item, if you're looking at the green sheet.
Okay.
Senator Petty?
I want to know what, okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Seeing no other questions, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Senator Clays? Okay. Anyone else have anything? Senator Peck?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm still just a little bit in the clouds here on the Commerce Committee report, where they added in money for several things with EDIF. They were removed from the Commerce Committee report. I'm thinking, I'll just pick the top one. It says add 28.2 million EDIF to restore appropriations transfers. So I'm not 100% certain what the motion that I supported did. So, and there are several. You will see number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. I mean, the Commerce Committee just added all kinds of spending, and it was all EDIF. So I'm trying to figure out, because some of these positions I think are too high, but if we drop them down to 0, that's about the right level.
He just made a statement. Yeah. Except what he put back.
That was the original.
We'll have Charday give a little explanation, so maybe that would clear everything up for you, Senator Peck. That's all.
Mr. Chair, Senator, in the Department of Commerce, the EDIF that is in the budget currently is the operating grant and the Office of Broadband Development. Those are the only 2 items. The other accounts are at 0 for the Senate right now.
Senator Owens.
Yeah, I would just add, as Senator Peck was talking, based off of page 7 here, in essence, you're right, other than the operating grant and the broadband, all of the other numbers on this sheet are at 0 now, okay? And the only thing that is retained there, because it was SGF, was this 15.5 million, the item number 1. That is still retained in the budget because it's SGF. Is that correct, Charday?
Mr. Chair,
Charday?
Senator, that is correct.
Very good. Thank you.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my concern is in going to conference. I don't mind going to conference with 0, but my concern is we haven't given our conferees any direction as to what level of funding. For example, we've got some here that I think are too high. And if these would be the guidelines for our conferees, That's not my position. That's not what I would support, because I think some of them are too high, and some of them are totally unnecessary. But, so that was the reason I was asking, because I have some amendments on some of these items. But if they're at zero, that's fine. But I just don't want the conferees going in thinking that the Ways and Means or Senate position is 28.2, and then 2, and 1.1, 900,000, et cetera. Well, you're going in at zero. I just don't, again, on some of these, I'm thinking, okay, well, we'll just pick the number 3 rather than 2. What about just 500,000, et cetera? But anyway, I'll stand down, but because now I've got an understanding, and I'll probably have to have conversations with the conferees to help them understand that the lower the better.
Senator Glaze.
I'm glad we're finally having a meaningful discussion about EDIF for the first time probably in my 13 years that we've been here, because this is exactly what this was intended to start, is that we need to have a discussion about what EDIF is. If these were sitting in a SGF fund in an agency, we would be reviewing them every year and discussing them. Because they're pocketed away outside of SGF, we never review them. And here we are, Senator Peck, having a meaningful discussion about the value of each of these programs. So I appreciate that. And yes, maybe some of them are overfunded, maybe some are underfunded, maybe some of them don't belong in EDIF, maybe some of them do. But that's the discussion that needs to be had with the House, is where do these things belong? So I appreciate that.
Senator Alley.
And I don't remember the House's position on all of these, but when you go back through and zero all these out, you're putting the conferees at a disadvantage, I believe, when we go into negotiations with the House. Their House position then is the top level.
Senator Glaze.
That is an accurate statement. Based on the House rule, each of those line items would be capped at the highest number. So the high number is the House number. That's correct.
Other questions? Senator Erickson.
Probably dangerous to think out loud here, Mr. Chair, but I keep hearing the House rules, the House rules, the House rules. What if we had Senate rules that conflicted with the House rules? What would happen in conference?
Senator Glaze.
That's a great question. I would imagine one would be forced into suspending their rules on the floor to accept one or the other's position. So that would be the logical outcome if in conflict. But typically we have joint rules when it comes to things that affect both chambers. You would think that that would be the position that we'd be in here, but instead the House decided to put that just in their rules. So they would require at this stage, if they were to deviate from their rules, a motion on the House floor to suspend the rule.
Senator Erickson.
Food for thought, Mr. Chair. I don't want to get into the proverbial game of chicken here with the House, but it seems like that might bear some consideration, because I hear us basically acceding to the will of the House rules, and I just want us to maybe think about that in context going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? Any other changes? Oh, Senator Erickson.
I got all caught up in the rules discussion, and yes, Mr. Chair, I do thank you very much. I believe David has the amendment.
Would you like to explain?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will, to the best of my ability. So this has been an issue for a while, ever since we've had STAR bonds, and then we removed the sales tax on food. there were businesses in those star bond districts that relied on that revenue to pay off the star bond. So this is to try to address that for those cities and populations, at least for the short term, with a population of 30,000 and more, to certify how much they have lost in sales tax revenue on food, and that we make that right. To me, in my opinion, you don't change the rules midstream without, backing up the consequences of that, so. Yes, 30,000 or less. I'm sorry, I don't know if I said that, but 30,000 population or less. So with that, I move my amendment.
We have a motion, second by Senator Clays. Discussion, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I appreciate this motion. The reason for this is that there was a multi-phase star bond project. And while in previous discussions in this committee, we had pulled back from using that star bond sales tax backup fund of sorts for the food sales tax reduction. So grocery stores essentially got taken out of generating tax revenue in all of these star bond districts. What we found, though, was that the amount of money that was going to go into those wouldn't necessarily have changed the ability for them to pay off any of those bonds. However, there are a couple of instances now that there are existing star bond projects going into, they are multi-phase star bond projects, going into their third phase, that those projects do require an additional sum of money that would have been provided by the grocery stores inside the star bond district. And that is what the senator, I believe, means by changing the rules in the middle of the game. They had already made those investments through the first two phases, are now going into the third phase. And so there are now a couple of instances where the grocery sales tax does need to have that state backup in order for the bonds to be paid. And we had discussed at the time, so this has been a multi-year deal because of the drawdown of the food sales tax. We had discussed that if we had found an instance where these funds were needed, that we would provide them rather than just throwing $9–10 million into a fund and sending it out to just pay off bonds early. Instead, we're being very targeted about this by going into those projects where they would have struggles to pay the bond were it not for this fund backing up that food sales tax reduction. So just to clarify and add some context to the why and some history on that fund, it does exist. It's just we hadn't funded it in the past. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so this be to the maker of the amendment. So would these be on projects, as you said, with a population of 30,000 or less, that are all on time, that are not delinquent in any way? And so the state will then be picking up with SGF what they have, what they are, the project is providing would have been paid with food tax money if the state portion of the food tax had not been removed.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you. I see that my phone a friend is wanting to address this, so I will yield to Senator Clays.
Senator Clays.
Yeah, so it does require that the calculation be made off the food sales tax that would be missing. So it isn't just extra money being thrown at it. It's a calculation that's derived from those grocery stores or grocery products that are now at zero that are being sold inside the district, and the state is simply backing that up. We had a principled discussion about it initially, and that fund was set up in the budget. We ended up pulling it out, like I said, because it only had the effect on the existing star bond projects of paying their bonds off early. It didn't have the effect of preventing one from going into default. They were all on time with their payments. Nothing bad was happening. This just happens to be a very specific scenario where a multi-phase one, if it were to go into its third phase, would not be able to pay its bond because that food sales tax has been taken away. If we had funded the fund, this would be eligible. So it would be no different. The difference is that we're just simply choosing those projects where it's necessary to fund as opposed to just funding all of them with backup food sales tax through SGF.
And just as a
Senator Petty.
as a follow-up, so is there a limit or is there a time frame attached to this? Or is it just until they pay off the STAR bonds?
Senator Clays.
So because it's in the budget, it's just for a year.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Anyone else have any amendments? Senator Alley. Senator Clays.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been trying to think this through. We had some MRO project money, and I do not want to take away from what the Topeka Airport Authority is attempting to get accomplished. Super supportive of what they're doing. I just want to convert that, because we had created the loan fund, convert that item, the 15 million? 15.5 million to a loan as opposed to a grant to the Topeka Airports Authority. And that's a motion.
We have a motion. We have a second by Senator Fagg. Questions or discussion on? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do you have another one? Anyone else have anything? Seeing none, we'll, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All along, we were going to have discussion on EDIF. And then I am a little confused about what happened here. That's not the intent of what we had when he came in, to do this, to allow a position that we can negotiate in conference. We were trying to get a budget for the Senate Commerce Committee. And even though it may be the right thing to do, I'm going to not support this motion, because this should have happened prior to, not the day of, we're voting on this. So I'm going to support the motion for this.
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the commerce budget as amended for FY 25 and 26.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Senator Peck seconds. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
No.
Okay, those in favor, raise your hand. 6, motion passes. Did you have anything else? Senator Alley, that was it for Commerce. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to the Office of the Attorney General. We had that the other day, the report out. Does anyone have any amendments for the Attorney General's office? Senator Cluse. Senator Peck, did you have one also? Okay. Senator Cluse, I recognize you first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for the VINE program, which provides real-time notifications when offenders are released from custody. And guess I need a copy of that.
Senator Cluse, would you like to explain your amendment?
Yeah, it's just going to have the funding for FY 2025 in the Office of the Attorney General. For the fiscal year 2025. With that, I move my amendment.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Do we have a second on his motion? Senator Peck seconds. Questions and discussion? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the Attorney General's budget. I'm looking on page 1 of the green sheet, and so it's line 4, number 4, the VINE system funding. Is that what this is pertaining to, Senator?
Senator Cluse.
Sorry, let me get to that page.
What was the page on the green sheets?
Oh, I'm on the green sheets, number page 1.
Page 1. And what line number?
It's number 4 under the Attorney Gen. It's
Number 4 under Attorney General.
in FY 26.
I think it's 25.
Okay. Sorry, Mr.
Senator Cluse.
Clarification on that, yeah. So it will be, it's not on the green sheet, but it's going to be added into the FY 2025.
It's not on the green sheet. Senator Petty.
It's in 2026.
So it's in here for 26, and now you are, so this amendment is adding in, and this is SGF, in the same amount in 25.
Yes,
Senator Cluse.
yes, Mr. Chairman.
And not that I think these are important funds, but is there a reason why it was not in 25?
Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, because it's not in there.
Senator Petty.
I wish my answers worked out well. Is this an expansion of already monies that are in the 2025 budget within the Attorney General's office for the VINE system funding?
Senator Cluse. Senator Cluse.
The agency did a request already, but it was going to cost more, so that's why we're having the additional funds.
Senator Petty.
It's going to cost more in 25 for the VINE system funding?
Senator Cluse.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just making sure I get the clarity on that. So other sources of funding have decreased, so this would allow them to maintain the same level. So,
Senator Petty.
Thank you for that information. I think that would be true of some other programs, but I appreciate the information you provided.
Other questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Anyone else have anything for Attorney General's office? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When the Attorney General was before us and we were hearing the agency budget, I asked a question, pardon me, just choked me up on this one, about the Safe and Secure Firearms Detection Program. You will notice on the green sheets that there is $7 million appropriated from State General Fund for the program to hire a private vendor for firearm detection. In 2026, you will see another $7 million. We're at $14 million. In 2027, you will see another $6 million. So we're looking at $20 million for a private vendor. And I have been made aware that the private vendor that most likely would receive the funding has not been reliable in other states. Whether it's this particular entity or another entity, I don't believe that the AI software has advanced enough to where it is reliable. There have been several false alarms where law enforcement have shown up at schools in force to protect the school, which we always want if there is indeed a weapon, but there was no weapon. It was a shadow or something. In one case, it was just a student's arm. So since the Attorney General did not know what I was talking about when I asked about this, I found out later that the Attorney General's office did not request this funding. I'm going to make a motion to delete $7 million for safe and secure firearm detection in fiscal year 2025. One reason, Mr. Chairman, by the time we get through the process, it's going to certainly be April, and that means April, May, June. Spending $7 million in 3 months, I don't think is even possible. But I'm also going to make in one motion to delete the $7 million in fiscal year 2026 and $6 million in 2027 for a total of $20 million in state general fund savings if schools, public entities, non-accredited or accredited non-public schools, by the way, there is, I apologize, there is a balloon that's being handed out. It's prepared. If they wish to have this firearm detection program in their schools or in a public entity, they can certainly do that. There's nothing that I believe would stop any entity from hiring an AI or having AI software put in for detection of firearms. So because of the fact, again, Mr. Chairman, that we're talking about a lot of money, the Attorney General's office didn't know what I was talking about, didn't request it, and there's not reliability with the AI, I don't think this is the right time for us to go down that road. It is in the House budget, so it is certainly conferenceable. Should our conferees be convinced at another time that it is worth having, well, then they can determine the dollar amount. But again, $20 million seems excessive, and when we're talking about something that's not requested and unreliable, I just can't support it. So I'm making a motion to delete that funding.
Motion second by Senator Fagg. Questions and discussion on deleting them funds? Senator Alley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Am I understanding the verbiage will be included in the dollar amount will be zero for this amount? Is that what I'm hearing? The request, is it still in there?
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, there was no request. This is strictly a House position and a House substitute for House Bill 2007. So we are deleting the funding and all of the language in the balloon.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know what the House vote was on that? I was just curious.
I believe the House position was the same as this, correct? 20 million? The House position does have the money in. So we'll be at that zero this time, and it'll be the higher number. Other questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Anyone have anything else for the Attorney Generals? Okay. Next, we will go to, yeah, if you want to make my, okay. So we need to have a motion to move the Attorney General. No, we don't need a motion on this, right? Okay. Yeah, was no report out, so. Yeah. Okay, so Senator Peterson.
You believe that might, that affect the CPR AEDs where we pull that money out of that back in? Yes.
That's in the education budget, so I'll make sure.
So it just came out on our side, so his spending was fine.
The AID will stay in. It's in there. You're welcome. Other questions? Okay, we will move on to the Board of Indigent Defense. You want an overview? Okay. Okay. Okay, on the Board of Indigent Defense amendments, Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I believe I do have a handout while that is being handed out. During the reappropriation process, there was 6 million lapsed from bids. For those of you guys that aren't overly familiar with the Board of Indigent Defense, they do an incredibly important work ensuring representation regardless of income. In felony cases, if I remember correctly, that's north of 85% of felony cases require an indigent defense. And so having consulted with them regularly after 6 million being lapsed, they really need 1.4 of that back from the 6 million. So they're willing to forego the 4.6, but they really need 1.4 million to cover the cost of assigned counsel, expert fees, death penalty litigation costs, payroll, pretty well everything for the rest of 2025. And I'll go ahead and move that motion.
Okay, we have a motion, a second by Senator Petty. Questions or discussion on the Owens amendment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Anyone have any others? Okay, we'll move on to the judicial branch. Anyone have any amendments for the judicial branch? Okay. Got it? Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No money on this one. Know how you'll love to hear that. This is for the creation of a no-limit federal fund to accept and deposit grant funds for FY 2026. The fund name will be called the Justice/MH Collaboration Grant.
That's your motion? It's his motion. We have a second. Senator Peterson seconds. Discussion on the language. Senator Petty.
This is for the maker of the motion. So it's establishing a grant fund, it's establishing a location for grants. Is there any limitation on the type of grants that can go into this fund and where they can go?
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By way of explainer, I guess I probably should have followed with that without recognizing other people. I thought we were doing a second there. So there was a county that received federal grant funding provided by the U.S. Department of Justice to establish a behavioral health court program and a veterans court to address mental health disorders that lead to criminal offenses. It has the goal of assisting individuals with receiving their needed help, be it becoming productive in the community, reducing recidivism, or care or treatment of the cases or criminal cases. So this county is entering into an MOU with the judicial branch, our judicial branch, to support that work. But there is no SGF funding, just a no-limit federal fund to accept and deposit grant funds for this purpose for FY 26.
Senator Petty.
So I'm going to say that this would be a specialty court. Would that be correct?
Senator Clays.
Specialty court. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, the BHCs. Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
And
Senator Petty.
And so would this then be a potential fund that could help in other locations in our state to help with especially courts? Because there are several in my county, and I know there's interest in that, and it's always funding is I'm seeing a friend say no. Okay, so I'll stop there.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Anyone have anything else for judicial? Okay. I don't know. I guess we could just start out with other amendments, or we've went through all the agencies now. Is there any particular changes or amendments that you have for other options? Senator Clays. Oh.
We already have the other committee coming
Oh, okay. Okay. Let's do this later. Yeah. Well, we're not going to be able to do that this time. I've just been told that there's another committee coming in here. So, and there's, I noticed the gentleman from the libraries here. We have not discussed the library, but I don't know, does anyone have any amendments for the library? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have an amendment for the library, and it's being passed out right now. So it is the position that we had last year, the Senate had last year when we went into a conference, and this is a position that was put into the budget last year with a proviso. I will tell you that that the libraries would very much like to have more. The governor actually had $2,000 per library in her budget, but this is matching what we did last year because the House does not have a position on this. So it'd be $1,000 per library, and that was a position that we had last year.
Is that a motion?
I make that as motion.
Okay. Got a second by Senator Fagg. Questions or discussion on the funding like we did last year? Senator Fagg.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say I'm in strong support of this. We did some work on that last year, and I know there's a lot of small hospitals or libraries all over the state that this was a good shot in the arm. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Did you have one in?
Oh, I'll go ahead.
Senator Clays.
All right, I'm going to wing it so that we're not wasting people's time later. So last year, we did a proviso that funded through the state library the reading services for the blind. And I believe it's about 99,000, 98,000, 97,000 going once. Yes. Going, let me get a number so that this is at least somewhat accurate. But by way of just background on this, there's been a bill the past few years attempting to make its way through that hasn't, that would fund this position and then the services. And we just decided to do it through the budget last year, year before. We've done it a couple years, 2 years? Yeah. So this would be year 3 of doing it. It's 95. Just 95 even? No, 95,399. Okay, 95,399. And that would be the amount for the state library for these services.
We have a motion, second by Senator Petty. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Pardon me? Okay, Senator Owens.
Oh, no, not on the library. Not on the library. Were we just doing library work?
Well, that's what we were trying to finish the library before we recess.
No problem. I'll wait until later. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll recess until the end of session, and then we'll come back to finish our work. With that, we are in recess.